We've been talking about how to build dynamic web pages, and we've been looking at what we can do with get and post and cookies. But there's another concept that I want to talk about. It's a little bit of a high-level concept, but it's going to become important to us. So bear with me if the first part seems a little bit complicated. We'll get to the practical application, and that is headers. What we want to be able to do is redirect the users to different pages in our PHP scripts. But first we have to talk about headers and what headers are. Whenever a server makes a request to the PHP page, before our server responds to the user's browser request with HTML, it's going to first construct a set of headers, and it's going to send those headers along to their web page first. And those headers are going to provide information about what the browser can expect to receive next. Now, there's some high-level types of header commands we can give, and to give a header command, we simply say header with whatever kind of header information we want to send. Some examples might be, if we were going to send PDF, we could say that the content type to expect coming is going to be a PDF. And that would tell the browser to take the appropriate steps for a PDF. And maybe you've even set these preferences in your browser for which application should handle which content types. If we wanted to send our information to the user's browser not as HTML, but as an Excel file, we would use the second two commands. And that would tell it, look, what's coming is going to be an Excel file. So you need to save this off as an Excel file on the user's computer in the place that they specify. Those are pretty high-level kinds of commands, and there are a lot more. We can tell it information about how it should cache the pages, all sorts of stuff like that. But what we're really interested in is not in specifying what that header should contain, but in actually what the header is itself. Let's take a look at it. I think it'll be a little clearer once we actually start using it. So I'm going to go ahead and do a save as on my current file, the sessions PHP, and I'm just going to make it headers.php. And we'll get rid of our session because we're not interested in connecting to a session this time. And I'm just going to have some basic HTML here with headers. Because headers are the very first thing that's being sent, if we want to make any manipulation to the headers whatsoever, it has to occur before we send anything else. Remember, we're telling their browser, here's what's coming down the pipe. Get ready for it. And then we send it. If we've already started sending something, like HTML, we'll already have sent a set of headers to them. We'll have said, here's some HTML. And then, partway through, we would issue the headers command, and it would say, send a new set of headers to them, and it would say, wait a minute, I'm already in the middle of a document. So we need to have it at the very beginning if we're going to do anything with the headers. So let's go ahead and start there. Before the HTML outputs anything, and that includes white space. Even a single space will mess it up. So let's go ahead and specify the header function that we saw at the beginning. And instead of putting in one of those esoteric kinds of commands that do very high-level things, let's issue a very simple response to the server, which is http:/1.0 404 not found. Now, you're probably very familiar with 404 errors. It basically means that we're going to tell the server that they were not able to find the page, that they tried to find it and it didn't succeed. Let's save our page and let's go over and see what happens when we try to load that up. Headers. It went ahead and it loaded the page. Now, we were hoping that it would stop and not load the page. But that's because it told it, look, I've got a 404 coming, and then it went ahead and sent the HTML. So the next step after we do a header request like that is going to be exit. So we're going to exit out immediately after. Let's save it and try it one more time. And it gave us a 404 error. It didn't find the headers page. You'll see that it says Mozilla Firefox at the top. This is the way that it handled its 404 error. And in fact, if we do a view source, you'll see that it actually came back with nothing. It returned absolutely nothing. It exited out and never gave us anything here. And the response to their web server, if we wanted to go in the log files and look for it, would be that it was 404. So that could be useful if we wanted to do some processing and then return something that said, okay, I didn't find the page. But it's probably not what we actually want to do when we're making our application. What's more interesting to us, and I'm going to just comment this out so that it's still there and we can reference it in the future. And I'm going to put, this is how you return a 404 error. But I'm going to instead put something right above it. And this is how you redirect a page. And that's what we're really interested in. So I'm going to uncomment those lines. And it's going to take the exact same format. Instead of just sending the 404 header and exiting, instead, we're going to send a special command, which is location. And that's the location of the file that it ought to be returning. And let's go ahead and give it a different page name. Let's see. Let's look in our PHP sandbox here and see what we've got. How about just basic.html? That's a good target for it. So we'll say that it should instead return basic.html. So I'm going to save that. And now let's try it. Let's load up headers. And you see, it took me to basic. Boom, like that. Sent me to the new page. And now it says basic up here. And actually my URL says basic as well, because it actually redirected me to basic. And it didn't do anything that was below it. It never even touched this code. As soon as we got a header information sent and exit. And that header told it, stop what you're doing, web server. Tell their browser that this is the page you're getting instead. And that's what it did. It basically gave them the new page while simultaneously saying, I'm redirecting you to this page. It's actually, if you're technically inclined, it's called a 302 redirect. Instead of that 404 not found, it's a 302 redirect that was done. Now, as I mentioned before, we can only send one of these to the browser. If we try and send a second one, it'll complain to us. Now, as long as we have exit here at the end, it'll keep anything else from executing. If we happen to have another header call right below it, it would never get there. So that's part of why we have that exit, is to say we're done completely, we've done the header, and we've moved on. Now, I said earlier that header had to be the very first thing before you sent any white space. And if you'll remember, I said the same thing about sessions. Let's test that now. Let's go ahead and grab this whole block of PHP code and cut it and paste it down into our body. And let's save the page and then switch back over to our browser and bring back up that same page. Headers.php. And it came back with basic.html. It still worked. Now, my guess is that for half of you out there, it didn't work. And the reason why is because output buffering may or may not be turned on your machine. So, let's talk for a second about what output buffering is, because it obviously makes a big difference on the way we code and where we're able to put these headers. The idea behind output buffering is that instead of running into the problem where we might send headers after the content, why don't we take all of the content that's going to be sent to the browser and store it up until we're sure that we're completely done and there's nothing else to send. Then we'll send the headers and then we'll send the content. And that's output buffering. Now, buffering can also be used to store up a certain amount of information and then send that to the user and then store up a bit more and send that to the user. There's some advanced ways we can use it. But where it applies to us here is with headers, I happen to have my output buffering turned on, and that's in my php.ini file. That's where we make that change. Let's take a quick look at my PHP file. Here I am inside a terminal window where I've opened up my php.ini file to edit. And you'll see that I'm at the section already on output buffering. And it tells at the beginning, output buffering allows you to send header lines, including cookies, and that also means sessions, even after you send body content at the price of slowing down